Hey gang, this is Deke McClelland. Welcome to Deke's Techniques. This week, I'm going to show you how to create the effect of hand-carved letters in wood in Photoshop. So just imagine real hands operating real carving tools in real wood. This is what you might call a real wood Photoshop technique. We're going to take these letters right here that I painted using a Wacom tablet, and we're going to turn them into this photorealistic carving. And we're going to do so using a blend mode that you probably don't use very often, if at all. And it's called dissolve. Now, to say that the dissolve mode is rarely useful is a wild understatement. What it does is it takes nice blurry edges like these and turns them into horrible looking noise artifacts. So you might wonder, how in the world do we start with this and end up with this wonderful effect? Well, why should I tell you when I can show you exactly how it works? Okay, so I just want to start things off by showing you how the perimeter of each one of these characters actually bleeds into the wood grain. And we're going to achieve that effect using a combination of the dissolve blend mode and a couple of filters. We'll go and zoom out so you can see the entire effect. And we're going to start off in this file in which I've hand-drawn some characters on an independent layer using a Wacom tablet. And I'm going to change the fill opacity for these letters to 0%. And I can do that, assuming that one of my selection tools is active, by pressing Shift-0-0. At least that's how it works in Photoshop CS6. Now let's go ahead and create a soft version of those characters using a drop shadow. So I'll drop down to the FX icon, click on it, and choose drop shadow. I actually want my color to be white, so I'll click on the color swatch and change the color to white here in the color picker. Click OK, and I'll increase the opacity level to 100% and change the blend mode to normal so that we can actually see the characters. Right now, those invisible characters are cutting holes in the shadow, so I'm going to turn off this checkbox. Layer knocks out drop shadow, so we can see the shadow all by itself. And I'll reduce the distance value to 0, and I'll take the size value up to 10. All right, now if you zoom in on the text here, you'll see that we've got blurry letters. I want them to be dithered. That is, I want them to have noisy dot edges. So I'll change the blend mode from normal to dissolve, and we end up with this effect here. And if you want more dots, then you would raise your size value. For example, if I change the size value to 30, we get dots all over the place. If I want fewer dots and I would reduce that size value, you still get some dithered edges, even at a size value of 0. But as I say, I'm going to go with 10. And then I'll click OK in order to accept that change. Now we need to turn these letters into a layer mask. So I'm going to click on this sign layer right there, directly below the letters. And I'm going to press the Alt key, or the Option key on the Mac, click the black-white icon at the bottom of the Layers panel, and choose the very top command, Solid Color. And I'll change the name of this layer to black, and click OK. And assuming that the foreground color is black, then Photoshop should fill the layer with black by default. If not, change the color to black, and then click OK. All right, now we need to select those white letters against the black background, and we can do that automatically from the Channels panel, just by switching over to Channels, then pressing the Control key or the Command key on the Mac and clicking on RGB, and that goes ahead and selects the white pixels and deselects the black ones. Now switch back to the Layers panel and turn both the Go Away and black layers off. Click on that sign layer to make it active, and then press the Alt key or the Option key on the Mac and drag the thumbnail to the top of the stack in order to duplicate that layer. There's already a layer mask assigned to this layer that's carving the sign against the country road background. I want to get rid of it by right-clicking on the layer mask thumbnail and choosing Delete Layer Mask. Now that we have an unmasked version of the sign layer, we need to remask it inside the letters by dropping down to the Add Layer Mask icon at the bottom of the panel and clicking on it. Now, because the letters are filled with the sign and they're set against the sign, they are now invisible. We'll make them visible again by adding a few layer effects. So drop down to the FX icon at the bottom of the Layers panel, click on it, and choose Inner Shadow. And I'm going to dial in a color by clicking on the color swatch. And I'll change the hue value to 30 degrees, I'll change the saturation to 100, and then the brightness to 25%. Then click OK. Change the blend mode from multiply to linear burn to really burn in those shadows. And then I'll take the opacity level down to 50%. I'll tab my way to the distance value, and I'll take it up to 15, Leave the choke set to 0% and then take the size up to 25 pixels. Now we need to add a little more differentiation. So I'm going to click on Outer Glow in order to trace the outline of these letters. I don't want it to be white, however. I want it to be dark. So I'll click on the color swatch, which might be yellow in your case, by the way. And I'll dial in a dark brown once again, 30 degrees for the hue, 100% for the saturation, and 25% for the brightness. So those exact same values we used for the inner shadow. Click OK. Change the blend mode from screen to the same mode we use for the shadow, which is linear burn. This time, let's take the opacity level down to 55%, and I'll take the size down to 2 pixels. So we have just a little bit of tracing around those edges. Finally, I want to color the inside of the letters, and I'll do that using a color overlay effect. We don't want red, of course, so click on the color swatch, dial in a hue once again of 30 degrees, take the saturation level down to 75%, and I'm going to go with a brightness of 35% in this case. Click OK. Change the blend mode from normal to hard light in order to create this vivid darkening effect here, and then I'll take the opacity level down to 40%. Then I'll click OK in order to accept those layer effects. Now, if you zoom in on your effect, I'll go ahead and zoom in to 300% so we can see what's going on at a macro level here. And I want to move the wood grain that's inside the letters down a little bit so it appears to be recessed. And so I need to move the layer independently of its mask. So turn off the chain icon in between those two thumbnails, then click on the layer thumbnail, the one that looks like a little sign, to make it active, and press Control down arrow or Command down arrow on a Mac 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times in a row in order to scoot that wood grain down 5 pixels inside the letters. Now click on the layer mask thumbnail again to make it active. Notice how we have these stray pixels around the outlines of the letters? That's a function of the dither blend mode. We need to turn those dots into little bits of wood grain, and we can do that using motion blur. So again, make sure the layer mask thumbnail is selected, and then go up to the filter menu, choose blur, and choose motion blur. I came up with an angle value of -3 degrees because the wood grain's just at a very slight clockwise angle, and the distance should be pretty small, I think, about 5 pixels. Then I'll click OK to accept that change. To compensate for the blur, we need a little bit of sharpen. So I'll go up to the filter menu, choose sharpen, and choose smart sharpen. I came up with these values right here. An amount of 100%, radius set to 1 pixel, and then remove set to lens blur so that we get the sharpest results possible. Then click OK in order to accept that effect, and we have now converted the dithered dots into little bits of wood grain. Now I'll press Shift F in order to switch to the full screen mode. Press Control 0 or Command 0 to center my zoom, and that is the final effect, friends. A series of letters hand-carved into wood here inside Photoshop. Hey gang, this is Deke McClelland. Welcome to Deke's Techniques. Today we're going to have what the kids are calling a lot of fun. Now I know some of you might object to that. You think, some of the kids actually look up to you, Deke, because you're old and stuff. And it's bad enough that they rap with each other in a crazy way that they do. You do not need to be encouraging them. Well, my apologies. But the plain fact of the matter is, today we're going to be having a whole lot of fun. Specifically, we're going to take this base design and we're going to fill that circle with this network of spirograph patterns in Adobe Illustrator. And what's remarkable about this design is that if you peel away the text and the bar in the center and those 2 stars on either side, you're left with this right here. And this right here is nothing more than a single circle inside of Illustrator. All you have to do is draw a circle. That is the end of the talent required. And then you apply a bunch of dynamic effects and you are rewarded with this beautiful design. Here, let me show you exactly how it works. All right, here's the effect we're going for. I just want you to have a moment to see the artwork on screen. And here's where we're going to start. If you're working along with me, this document features a classic font called Hobo. If you don't have Hobo installed on your system, then you can change this main text to anything you like. We're going to be working on this circle, however. So go ahead and select it using the black arrow tool. And then go up to the window menu and choose the appearance command in order to bring up the appearance panel, which is where we're going to be doing all of our work. Notice that this path currently features a 4-point stroke, no fill, We're going to be adding a series of strokes here. And we're going to start things off by creating a stroke around the typeset on a circle. And you can assign as many strokes and fills to an object as you want inside of Illustrator. To copy the existing stroke, all you do is click on it to select it. And then you click on this little page icon, which will go ahead and create a duplicate. With that stroke selected, it's very important that the stroke and not the path is selected. Go up to the Effect menu. Choose Distort and Transform, and then choose the Transform command. And that'll bring up this monstrous Transform Effect dialog box here. Change both the horizontal and vertical values where this artwork is concerned to 130%. And then you can turn on the Preview checkbox to see the addition of that larger stroke. Then click OK in order to apply that effect. Now I want to create another copy of this original 4-point stroke. So I'll select it and then drop down to the little page icon and click on it. And that'll create this duplicate stroke down here. I'm going to go ahead and click on it to make it active. And then I'll change its line weight to 1 point. Next, we want to turn this stroke into an inset circle. And to do that, go up to the Effect menu and choose that second Transform command up there at the top. Or you can press that keyboard shortcut, Control-Shift-Alt-E, or Command-Shift-Option-E on the Mac. And that'll bring up the Transform Effect dialog box complete with the last settings you applied. This time, we want to change both the horizontal and vertical scale values to 97%. Turn on the Preview checkbox, and you'll see that inset circle. Then go ahead and click OK. Now we want to create another duplicate of this stroke in order to begin laying down the spirograph pattern. So go ahead and click on the page icon once again to make a copy of it. Then click on the duplicate stroke down there at the bottom of the stack. And if you twirl the stroke open, you'll see that it's got a transform effect assigned to it. We want to add another application of transform. And to do that, you go up to the Effect menu and choose that second command once again. Most likely, you're going to see this alert message, which is telling you that this is not the way to edit your existing transform effect. Instead, you're going to apply a new helping of that effect, which is exactly what we want. So just go ahead and click Apply New Effect. And this time, you want to change the horizontal value to 10% and the vertical value to 100%, and then turn on the Preview checkbox so that you can see your base ellipse right there in the center of the illustration. Now click OK in order to apply that effect. And now we need to apply Transform yet again by going up to the Effect menu and choosing that second Transform command. If you see the alert message, go ahead and click Apply New Effect again, and this time change the horizontal value to 100%. So both the scale values are 100% as you can see here. I'm going to change the angle to 9 degrees. So we're going to be rotating this ellipse like so. I'll go ahead and turn on the Preview checkbox so you can see it happen in the background. And now here's where the magic really happens. Click inside the Copies field there, and then press the up arrow key in order to create several copies of this ellipse. And what you want to do is create enough copies so that you completely fill in the gaps, and that will happen at a value of 19. And the reason is you're taking 180 degrees, which is half a circle, dividing it by 9 degrees, and that gets you 20, which means 1 original and 19 copies. Then go ahead and click OK in order to apply that effect. That gets us one spirograph pattern, but I want to add a couple of more. So I'm going to go ahead and twirl this stroke closed, and I'm going to twirl the top one closed as well, just so we have a little more room inside this panel. And I'll drop down to the page icon and click on it in order to create a copy of that spirograph pattern. Then I'll click on it to make it active, and I'll twirl it open. And you want to click on a second application of Transform, which is the one that reduced the width of the circle so that it becomes an ellipse. Turn on the Preview checkbox, and then go ahead and click in that horizontal scale value and press the up arrow key a few times in order to increase the value, in my case, to 14%. And we end up getting the network of spirograph patterns that you see on screen. Then go ahead and click OK in order to accept that effect. Now twirl this new stroke closed. Click on the previous one, that is the next stroke up, to make it active, and we want to create a duplicate of it by dropping down to the page icon. Then take that duplicate and drag it down the stack, so it's the very bottommost stroke. It's just going to make it easier to keep track of. Twirl that new stroke open, change its line weight, in my case, to 0.3 points, so that we have more of a hairline stroke. And you want to click on the third application of Transform, the bottommost one there, in order to bring up the Transform Effect dialog box, complete with the rotate value of 9 degrees and a total of 19 copies. turn on the preview checkbox, and I'm going to reduce the angle to 3 degrees this time so that we have these tightly packed hairline strokes. And notice, by the way, that our previous value of 9 degrees is divisible by our new value of 3 degrees so that the 1-point strokes every 9 degrees are covering up these new hairline strokes. Now you need to take the copies value up, and I'm going to press Shift up arrow a few times in order to increase that value to 50, and then I'm going to press the up arrow key in order to fill out that entire spirograph. And at a total of 59 copies, you no longer have any gaps in the pattern. Then go ahead and click OK in order to accept that final effect. Now I'll go ahead and click off the shape in order to deselect it, and that, friends, is how you create a spirograph pattern here inside Illustrator. In this movie, I'll show you how to create scalloped edges around a circular design element. And then in the next movie, I'll show you how to create this classic carve text effect. And we'll be achieving both variations on this artwork using dynamic effects here inside Adobe Illustrator. I'm going to switch over to my seal so far, and I'll go ahead and click on this inner circle because that's the actual real circle right there. And if I press Control-Y or Command-Y on a Mac in order to switch to the outline mode, you can see that this circle right there is responsible for everything else that's going on because we've stacked on a bunch of different strokes and applied dynamic effects. Press Control-Y or Command-Y on the Mac to switch back to the preview mode, and I'll press Control-Z or Command-Z on the Mac in order to move that circle back into place. And then I'm going to switch over to my Appearance panel. And notice right now I've got a total of 6 strokes, but no fills. I want to add a fill, a black fill in fact, to serve as the scallops. So I'm going to click on this little fill swatch, click the down pointing arrowhead in order to bring up the swatches panel, and select black as my fill color. I also want to increase the size of that fill so it consumes that outermost stroke. That happens to be the top stroke in the stack, and I can confirm that by turning off its eyeball for a moment, and sure enough, that outermost stroke disappears. I'll go ahead and turn it back on and twirl the stroke open so that I can gain access to its transform effect. And to make sure that I'm exactly matching that effect, I'll click on it to select it. And then I'll Alt-drag or Option-drag that transform effect onto the word fill right there and drop it into place. And now, if I twirl open fill, you can see that I've got a transform effect assigned to it as well. And thanks to the fact that I pressed the Alt or Option key, I duplicated the effect as opposed to strictly moving it. Obviously, I'm covering everything up, so I need to put a white fill in front of this black fill. I want to match the size of this fill, so I'll go ahead and click on it to make it active, and then click on a little page icon down here at the bottom of the panel. So I lift both the fill and its transform effect. Now I'm going to click this down pointing arrowhead for the fill and change its color from black to white. All right, now I'll go and twirl that fill closed and select the black fill once again to make it active. And then I'll go up to the Effect menu, choose Distort and Transform, and choose Pucker and Bloat, which allows you to achieve those scalloped edges. I'll go ahead and choose the command, and you want to turn on your Preview checkbox, and then reduce the value by pressing the down arrow key. And as you do so, you'll see that you're creating 4 scallops in all, one for each anchor point associated with the circle. Then when you get to about -10%, let's say, go ahead and click OK. We can always go back and change that value later. Now we need to introduce some more anchor points so that we have more scallops, and you do that by going up to the Object menu, choosing Path, and then choosing Add Anchor Points. And that's going to double the number of anchor points currently in the shape. So where we used to have 4 anchor points, 2 on the sides, 1 at the top, and 1 at the bottom, we now have a total of 8 anchor points. We need still more, so go back to the Object menu, choose Path, and again choose Add Anchor Points. And I want even more scallops than that, so I'll go to the Object menu, choose Path, and choose Add Anchor Points one more time. And that gives us a total of 32 of the spikes, because we went ahead and doubled the number of points associated with the circle 3 times. Now, I don't want these spikes to be this spiky, so I'm going to click on Pucker and Bloat here in the Appearance panel in order to modify my settings. And I'm going to increase this value from the keyboard to -6%, so we achieve these smaller scallops. Then I'll click OK. I also want my scallops to take up a little more room, so I want to shove them outward, in other words, and I'll do that by clicking on Transform for that black fill. I'll turn on the preview checkbox so I can see what I'm doing, and I'll increase both the horizontal and vertical values to 132%. Now I'll click OK. All right, now I don't want these scallops to be this spiky. I'm going to round them off a little bit. Make sure the fill is still selected. And then go up to the Effect menu, choose Path, and this time choose Offset Path. And we're looking for an offset value of just 1 point. We don't need much offset. Turn on the Preview checkbox to see those scallops grow. They're still pointy, however, so change the Joins option from miter to round, and that'll go ahead and add a little bit of roundness to the points. Then click OK in order to accept that effect. And now click off the circle to deselect it. And that's how you add scalloped edges to a circular design element here inside Illustrator. All right, here's the final version of that classic carving and shadow effect, applied to both the central text as well as these stars. I'm going to start things off in the seal that we created last week. And if you're working along with me, you should know that this central text here is set in the font Hobo, which a lot of folks think is a kind of 70s font. It's actually designed by Morris Fuller Benton in 1910. But that doesn't mean it's necessarily installed on your system. If it's not, go ahead and switch to some other font. All right, we'll start by creating the shadow effect, and you do that by going up to the window menu and choosing the Appearance command, which brings up the Appearance panel. Notice that we're not seeing any fills or strokes at this point, and that's because the characters, as opposed to the entire text object, are active. So what I want you to do is go up to the Control panel, click on that first white swatch right there, and switch it to None, so that we get rid of the fill. Now we want to add some fill and stroke attributes, not to the characters, but to the type. So go ahead and select the word type there. And then drop down to this icon, the second icon in, which reads Add New Fill, and go ahead and click on it to add both a fill and a stroke, as you can see. We're not going to need a stroke for this effect, so it's okay that it's set to none. I want you to click on the down pointing arrowhead next to fill and switch it to white in order to restore that white fill. Now let's create a copy of this fill by dropping down to the little page icon and clicking on it. And then I'm going to click on that rearmost fill there to make it active. All right, now I'm going to change the color of this fill to black. And then with that fill selected, I'll go up to the Effect menu, choose Distort and Transform, and choose the Transform command. Now we're not going to be able to see what we're doing here because we're moving a black object against the black background, but just take it from me right now that we want to increase the horizontal value to 1 point and increase the vertical value to 1 point as well. Works very nicely, at least where this artwork is concerned. Then I'll click OK in order to accept that change. Now let's make a copy of this fill by dropping down to the little page icon once again at the bottom of the Appearance panel, clicking on it, then select this bottommost fill and change its color back to white, and then twirl the fill open so that you can see the transform effect, and go ahead and click on it in order to select it. What you're going to need to do normally is just fool around with your horizontal and vertical values at this point. I came up with a horizontal value of 3.5, and I changed the vertical value to 2.8, and ended up achieving this offset shadow effect right there. And even though it's white, it is a reverse shadow. Now go ahead and click OK in order to accept that effect. And now I want this black boundary between the letters and the white shadow to be a little thicker. So I'm going to click on that black fill right there. Might as well twirl it open so I can see its transform effect. But we're going to be applying an offset effect by going up to the Effect menu, choosing Path, and then choosing Offset Path. And we want the offset value to be 1 point. You want the join set to miter. Turn on the Preview checkbox to see that black boundary thicken up. Then go ahead and click OK. Now to create the carving inside of the letters. And I'm going to do that by clicking on this black fill to make it active. And then I'm going to press the Alt key, or the Option key on the Mac, and drag it to the top of the stack. And because I have Alt or Option down, that goes ahead and makes a copy of that black fill. I'll go ahead and twirl it open so I can see its effects. And I'm going to start things off by clicking on Offset Path so I can change the setting to a negative value. I'm going to take it down to -3 points and turn on the Preview checkbox. And we end up with this thinner version of the fill, as you can see here. Then click OK, and click on the word Transform associated with that topmost black fill. And I'm going to change the first move value, the horizontal move value, to -1, and then I'll change the vertical value to 0. Turn on the Preview checkbox so that you can see that goes ahead and scoots that black fill inside the letters. Then click OK. Now let's make a copy of this black fill by clicking on it to make it active, and then clicking on a little page icon at the bottom of the appearance panel. And I'm going to twirl these guys closed just to eliminate as much confusion as possible. We want to change this fill color to white this time around. So the topmost fill should be white. Our existing offset path value is just fine. So go ahead and click on the word transform to bring up the transform effect dialog box. And I'm going to change the horizontal value to 2, and I'll change the vertical value to -1. And I figured all these values out through trial and error. And then I'll go ahead and turn on the preview checkbox, and you can see that scoots the white fill over, so just the left side of the black fill remains visible. And then I'll click OK to accept that effect. And now let's take a look at the stars, and I used a slightly different approach for them. So I'll go ahead and click on one of the stars with the black arrow, shift-click on the other so both are selected. Then I'll press Control-H or Command-H on the Mac in order to hide those selection edges. Currently, we have one black fill. I'll go ahead and select it to make it active, and then I'll click on the little page icon at the bottom of the panel in order to create a new fill. And I'm going to change the color of this fill to white. And then, with that fill selected, I'll go up to the Effect menu, choose Distort and Transform, and choose Transform once again. And then I went ahead and reduced both the horizontal and vertical values to 80%, and I'll turn on the Preview checkbox, and you can see that that scales each star with respect to its independent center point. Now I'll click OK in order to apply that effect. I'll click on the white fill to make it active, and I'll create a copy of it by clicking on the little page icon at the bottom of the panel. I'll change the color of the fill to black, and then I'll click on the word Transform in order to revisit the Transform Effect dialog box, and I'll increase both the horizontal and vertical move values to 1 point apiece, then turn on the Preview checkbox, and you can see that that goes ahead and scoots that smaller black fill. Now I'll click OK. Now at this point, the stars are looking a little too sharp, and you can see that my small black fill is going outside the boundaries of the star just a little bit. That's going to end up not being a problem here because I'm going to round off the corners of the star using a stroke. So I'll go ahead and select my stroke at the top of the stack here and change it from none to black. And I'll increase the line weight value to 2 points. Then I'll click on the word stroke, and I'll switch the corner setting from miter, which is the default, to round join. And we'll end up achieving this effect. The only problem is the stroke shouldn't be at the top of the stack, it should be at the bottom. So I'll go ahead and drag it to the bottom of the list here inside the appearance panel. We need to create a couple of copies of this stroke to serve as our shadows. So I'll click on a stroke to make it active, then I'll click on a little page icon to duplicate it. And I'll change the line weight for this bottommost stroke to 4 points. And I'll change the color of the stroke from black to white. And then I'm going to make a copy of this black stroke by clicking on it, and then I'll Alt or Option drag it to the bottom of the stack like so to make a copy. And then select the stroke to make it active. Let's change the line weight value to 3 points this time around. And then with that black stroke selected, I'll go up to the Effect menu, choose Distort and Transform, and choose the Transform command. And the values I came up with this time around were a move horizontal value of 2 and a move vertical value of 1.5. Then turn on the Preview checkbox in order to see that shadow emerge on screen. Next, click OK in order to accept that effect. Now I'll press Control-0 or Command-0 on the Mac in order to center my zoom. And that, folks, is how you create classic carved letters as well as ornamental shadows here inside Adobe Illustrator. Hey gang, this is Deke McClelland. Welcome to Deke's Techniques. This week, I'm going to show you how to take scanned pencil sketches and turn them into digital ink inside Photoshop. Now, as an example, I offer you this. When I was a kid, I used to do this kind of frame-by-frame comic strip, mostly as an act of self-preservation, don't you know? And it was called Jerkin' Jello. And the idea is, it's the escapades of this stick figure against this gigantic blob. And there's no dialogue or anything like that. It's just fight, fight, fight. But tragically, they all got confiscated by the teachers. And so I was relaying this story to my sons, telling them that this is something I did at their age. And they wanted to see one, so I drew one up. But I just used pencil. I had no desire to use ink for this project. Instead, what I decided to do was scan the artwork into Photoshop and then clean it up and turn it into, as I say, digital ink inside that program, which is a heck of a lot easier than applying manual ink. Here, let me show you exactly how it works. Just so you can see everything on screen, here's the original version of the scanned pencil sketch, looking just awful with all kinds of garbage in the background. Here's the version that we're going to create in this movie with the nice black pencil lines and, of course, the background cleaned up as well and some redrawn details and so forth. And then in a future movie, I'll show you how to set this whole thing against a graph paper background with these heavy horizontal lines that help us to better follow the frames so that we're more aware of the narrative associated with the cartoon. So I'm going to switch back to my original pencil image, and I'm going to scroll in on this detail here. And you can see that I've scrolled into 300%. But what I want you to note more than anything else is not only do we have some very weak shadow details, but they're very colorful as well. So the scanner's made up all this color inside of this RGB image. And if you were to check out the channel information there in the channels panel, you would see that the red channel and the green channel are in much better shape than the blue channel. So what we're going to do is deepen up the blacks inside of the image, as well as remove the color by combining just the red and the green channels using a channel mixer adjustment layer. So if you're working along with me, press the Alt key or the Option key on the Mac, and then click on this little black-white icon at the bottom of the Layers panel and choose the channel mixer command. Because you have the Alt or Option key down, that invokes the new layer dialog box. Go ahead and call this layer B and W and click OK. Then, here inside the Properties panel in CS6, this would be the Adjustments panel in CS5 and earlier, turn on the monochrome checkbox, and that will immediately remove the color from the image, as you can see here. And now we're mixing, notice this, by default 40% red along with 40% green and 20% blue, which adds up to a total of 100%. So we're maintaining a consistent luminance level. We want that blue out of there. So take that down to 0. And then normally what you do is compensate for the 0% blue by taking both the red and green values up to 50% apiece, so we still have 100%. But what I want to do is darken the darkest colors, which are currently gray. So I'm going to crank this constant value down to negative 200. So now we have 100% minus 200%, so we have negative 100% luminance, which leaves the entire image black. What we need to do is add that 200% across the red and green values. So we'll split it in half and turn red into 150%, so we're adding 100%. And then we'll turn green into 150% as well. And now we've brought back our whites and we've made those grays nice and black. That's the way you do it when you're scanning a very low contrast pencil sketch. If we were working with a pen and ink drawing, these same values would still work, although you might want to back them off a little bit. Completely up to you. I'm going to go ahead and zoom out by pressing Control-0 or Command-0 on the Mac. And I'm going to zoom in on another location inside this image. This area where Jello is getting very angry indeed, as you can see. You may note that we still don't have really great black details. So I'm going to add another adjustment layer by pressing the Alt key or the Option key on the Mac, clicking the black-white icon, and then choosing Levels this time around. Again, that'll bring up the new layer dialog box. I'll go ahead and call this new layer Blacks and click OK. And then inside the Levels dialog box, we want to go ahead and make anything that's medium gray or darker black by taking the black point value up to 128. And then you can leave the other two values alone. This assumes, by the way, that your background is absolutely white, as it is in my case. All right, now I'm going to hide the Properties panel. Another remaining problem, in case you can't see it there, is all of these horrifying JPEG artifacts. So this particular consumer scanner gave me two options for saving the scanned image, either JPEG or PDF, which you would think would work better, but still goes ahead and applies JPEG compression. So we need to get rid of those compression artifacts using a filter, which means we want to go ahead and convert our scan to a smart object, because that way we can apply the filter as a smart filter. In my case, I'm going to click on the background because that's my scan to make it active. Then I'll double click on it to bring up the new layer dialog box. And I'll call this layer Scan and click OK. Then I'll go up to the upper left corner of the Layers panel, click on the flyout menu icon, and choose Convert to Smart Object. Now at this point we can apply smart filters, and the filter we want to apply is here under the Filter menu. Then you go down to Noise, and then you choose this command Despeckle. And I want you to watch what happens on screen. We go from all this weird random noise around the edges to just about nothing. Almost everything goes away. The problem is that we gummed up the blacks. So this is before, by the way, and this is after. The solution is to scroll down to the bottom of the Layers panel and double-click on the little slider icons to the right of the word Despeckle in order to bring up the Blending Options dialog box. and then change the mode from normal to lighten. And that'll bring back our blacks while still hiding those compression artifacts. Then click OK. I'll turn off the smart filters. This is before. I'll zoom in here. And then if I turn the smart filters back on, this is after. Now, if you still feel like the JPEG artifacts are too extreme, you can apply a second helping of despeckle if you like. However, I will tell you that starts to erode the blacks, and you're going to be left with more fragile line details. Now I'll press Control-0 or Command-0 on the Mac to once again zoom out. We need to clean up some of the edges here. You can see now very clearly that the paper was scooted up and to the left a little bit, so we're seeing the area around the page in the background along with a little bit of a shadow. To clean those up, click on that blacks layer, which is that levels adjustment layer. Press Control-Shift-N or Command-Shift-N on the Mac to create a new layer, and I'm going to call this one Cover Up, and then click OK. And using the rectangular marquee tool, I'm going to drag down like so in order to select that right side of the image, taking care not to drag over any portions of the artwork. And then I'll shift drag like so, and I'm going to press the spacebar key in order to move that marquee down just a little bit because I don't want to cover up this impact line right there. I'll drag all the way over to the right-hand side so that we're selecting both the bottom and right side of the image. I'll press the D key to make sure my background color is white as by default, and then I'll press Control Backspace or Command Delete on the Mac to fill that area with white. Press Control-1 or Command-1 on the Mac to zoom into 100%, and then you press the Home key near your numerical keypad in order to scroll to the top left corner of the image. And then you look for junk and you select it. Like this is garbage right there, and this is some more garbage. You select both areas, and then you press Control Backspace or Command Delete to fill them with white. This guy needs to go as well. Then to scroll over one screen, you press Control Page Down. That would be Command Page Down on the Mac. Everything looks okay here, so I'll press Control Page Down or Command Page Down again, and I see this bit of garbage, and I'll press Control Backspace or Command Delete on the Mac to fill that with white. Now I want to go down, so I've gone over one row of screen images. Now I want to go down one screen by pressing Page Down by itself. And that is quite the goober right there. Something big and grimy on the glass, I'm guessing. So I'll select it again with the rectangular marquee, and I'll press Control Backspace or Command Delete on the Mac to fill it with white. And then we want to go the other direction. Control Page Up or Command Page Up on the Mac. Looks like that guy right there needs to go. And then Control Page Up or Command Page Up again. Everything's looking pretty good here, I think. Page down in order to go to the next row. Then Control Page Down or Command Page Down on the Mac, and we've got this weird line. And so this time I'm going to paint away the debris using the brush tool, and I'll press the X key to switch the foreground color to white this time, and then I'll just go ahead and paint in white. And even though this isn't, necessarily the world's best piece of artwork here, we do want to take it easy and make sure that we don't harm any of the good details. So I'm just trying to paint above Jello's face and his tongue and so forth, and taking care not to harm things. This looks like something that needs to go away right there. Since I'm already armed with a brush, I might as well keep painting. Then I'll press Control Page Up or Command Page Up on a Mac in order to scroll along the bottom of the image here. And I'm going to reduce the size of my brush and paint that guy in, and then press Control Page Up or Command Page Up once more. I'm now looking at the bottom left corner of the image. I've got a bit of a problem there, so I'll press the M key to select my rectangular marquee tool, select that region, and press Alt Backspace or Option Delete on the Mac to fill it with white. I'll zoom all the way out here. And I want you to notice this row right here, frames 9 through 13. You can see that the whole thing starts because Jerk kicks what he thinks is a rock, and it turns out to be a compressed version of Jello who starts to emerge and then get very angry. And I felt like this area right here, he just looks like a crumpled up piece of paper. So I went ahead and did a little bit of hand drawing in order to fix things. So I'll go ahead and zoom in on these details here. If you turn on a couple of layers higher in the stack, there's Hand Erase, which is a layer of white that I just brushed in. And so I brushed inside of these crumpled up Jellos there in order to cover up the faces. And then I created this Redrawn Details layer in which I painted with black in order to add some new details, as you're seeing here. We can see more of the face. My point being that you can make any kinds of modifications in Photoshop to your artwork that you want. Notice also this guy right here, this Jello, the right half of his face was initially missing. If I turn off Redrawn Details, you can see that he got cut off right there. And that's because actually I just didn't draw him. I ran out of paper at that location. So I'll go ahead and turn Redrawn Details back on. However, I'm not happy with his eyes. they could be in better shape. So I'll just go ahead and draw those in front of you so you can get a sense of what's going on here. And I'm going to do so using a Wacom tablet. So I'll start off by clicking on Hand Erase because I want to paint away the details first. White is my foreground color. I'll press the B key to switch to the brush tool, and then I'll just go ahead and paint in white like so in order to paint away that weird thing underneath his eye, and we want to paint back some of the eye there. Then when I want to paint away this area inside the eye, and then paint this thing away underneath his eye so that we have some cleaner details. And then I'll switch to redrawn details. That's the layer of black paint, and I'll press the X key so that I can paint with black this time around. And I'll just go ahead and draw some lines under his eyes like so. So he's still terribly vicious and angry in the whole number. And of course, Jerk is just scared silly over here. If I wanted to do a better job on Jerk, I could like paint in his head so he doesn't have a hole in it. But I actually find that sort of scribbly drawing style to be charming. So I'll just go ahead and leave that alone. And then I'll paint in a bigger eye right there. And then I'll just go ahead and press the X key while the redrawn details layer is still selected. And I'll paint in a little bit of white at that location. That's probably a little too much highlight. So I'll press the X key to switch to black again and paint some of that highlight away like so. And then I'll add some furrows to his brow. All right, now obviously you could spend some more time cleaning up your artwork if you want to, but at a certain point, you will reach a point of diminishing returns. And there is, of course, the idea that if you paint too much inside of Photoshop, you might as well have painted the entire artwork that way. All right, I'll go ahead and press Control-0 or Command-0 on the Mac in order to zoom out. Press the F key a couple of times in order to switch to the full screen mode so that we can see the entirety of the cartoon, at least from frames 1 through 33. Who knows what ends up happening after this point? In this movie, I'll show you how to create a graph paper background that you can use with any kind of drawing or annotation or anything else it is that you want to do. And it's a very simple trick that was suggested to me by this math teacher, this fellow named Sasha, who had entered this contest I did recently called Anything Goes. And I've gone ahead and elaborated on it so that we've got these additional horizontal lines that help us tell the rows of frames apart. And I've also colored in jello with white, but we can still see the graph lines through that white. And so the idea is you can create your own custom paper background effect. All right, so I'm going to switch back to the line art that we refined in the previous movie. And we're going to start things off by selecting all of the layers here inside the Layers panel, which you do by pressing Control-Alt-A or Command-Option-A on the Mac. And then I want to group them together by pressing Control-G or Command-G on the Mac. And I'll go ahead and rename this group Enhanced Scan, just so that we can keep track of what's going on. Now I want to create the graph paper background. And I'm going to do that by pressing Control-1 or Command-1 on the Mac in order to zoom in to 100%. And then I'm going to create a new layer by pressing Control-Shift-N or Command-Shift-N on the Mac. And I'll call it Pattern. And this will be the layer upon which we create the pattern in the first place. With my rectangular marquee tool selected, I'll go up to the options bar and I'll change the style from normal to fixed size. And then I'll go ahead and dial in a width and height value of 20 pixels apiece. And then what you want to do is click inside of your artwork in order to create a 20 by 20 pixel square and press the D key in order to restore the default foreground and background colors. And press Control Backspace or Command Delete to fill that square with white. Then what you want to do is go up to the Edit menu and choose Stroke. Make sure that the width is set to 1 pixel. You might as well set the location to inside and then click OK. And now if you press Control-H or Command-H on the Mac, you can see you've created a tiny square stroked with black. Make sure the square is still selected. I'll press Control-H or Command-H again so you can see those marching ants. Then I'll go up to the Edit menu and I'll choose Define Pattern. And I'll go ahead and name this guy Graph X20. So I just know it's a 20 by 20 square. And then I'll click OK. That's our first pattern. We need a second one here. I'm going to make it by turning off the Enhanced Scan group just so that we can see the selection against the transparent checkerboard background. And I'm going to create a few copies of this square by pressing Control-Alt-T or Command-Option-T on the Mac. That creates a copy of your artwork as well as entering the free transform mode. And then you want to go ahead and turn on this delta option, that is the triangle, here inside the options bar. And then change the Y value to 20 pixels. It's very important that you're working with pixels. If you aren't, then just enter 20px. And then press the Enter key or the Return key a couple of times in order to create a copy of that square. Now we want to create 11 more copies. And so that means pressing Control-Shift-Alt-T or Command-Shift-Option-T on a Mac. So just mash your fist T 11 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. How do I know we need 11 copies for a total of 13, by the way? So we had the first copy and then the original as well. Well, trial and error. I've just figured this out. That happens to be about as tall as each one of the rows of those Jerkin Jello frames are. Now what you want to do is press Control-D or Command-D on a Mac to deselect the image. Then go back up here to the options bar, and you want to change the height value to 20 times 3, so that's 260, and then -2 because we want to keep the line at the top and the bottom. So a height value of 258, if I'm not mistaken. Again, pixels, so enter PX if necessary. And then click very close to the top of the artwork like so. You probably won't get it exactly lined up, just as I haven't. To make sure it's exactly lined up, just press the arrow keys until you've selected everything throughout the central portion of this sort of stick here, so that the very top line of black is not selected and neither is the very bottom line of black. Everything else in between is. Then press Control Backspace or Command Delete on the Mac in order to fill that area with white. Now we want to select the entire layer by Control-clicking or Command-clicking on the thumbnail associated with the pattern layer. That selects the entire thing from top to bottom. So then go up to the Edit menu and choose Define Pattern. And we'll go ahead and call this one H-lines times 13. And that just tells me it's 13 graph cells tall. Then I'll go ahead and click OK. Now we're done with the selection. So press Control-D, Command-D on a Mac. And we're also done with that pattern layer, so you can turn it off. Now I'm going to create a new pattern layer by pressing the Alt key or the Option key on a Mac, clicking on a black white icon at the bottom of the Layers panel, and then I'll choose the Pattern command, and I'll call this guy Graph, and then click OK. And then inside the Pattern Fill dialog box, you want to select the second to last pattern, because it's the first pattern that we just created, which should be Graph times 20. And you'll see all these graph lines. They look terrible, but they'll look great in just a second. Click OK in order to accept that change. And now I want to go ahead and move that graph layer to the bottom of the stack, so I'll drag it underneath the Enhanced Scan group. And I need to colorize it. I want to see the green paper with slightly darker green lines in front of it. So I'll drop down to the FX icon at the bottom of the Layers panel, and I'll choose Color Overlay. And I'll click on the red color swatch. Of course, I don't want screaming bright red. What I want is a hue of 85 degrees, a saturation of 20%, and a brightness value of 85%. Click OK, and then change the blend mode from normal to screen. That way we'll keep the whites, and we'll change the colors of the black lines to this new green. Now I want to fill in the squares in the background, and I'll do that by turning on Gradient Overlay, which is going to serve as a flat color, and we're going to turn it into a flat color. You can see Color Overlays on top of Gradient Overlay, so that means the lines that are colored are going to be on top of this flat fill that we're going to create behind. May not make much sense yet, but I think it will in just a moment. Click on this gradient bar, and notice that by default you've got black as your first color stop, and then white as your second color stop. Go ahead and double-click on the white color stop to bring up the Color Picker dialog box. Change it to black, so 000 for the HSB values. Click OK, and now we're going from black to black, which means we have a flat fill in the background. Click OK. Now it's too dark, so reduce the opacity to 50% and take a look at that. There we now have dark green against light green, even though we're using Color Overlay combined with Gradient Overlay. I know it's crazy, but it works great. Then click OK. It is actually the best solution that I have found. I'm going to go ahead and zoom out a click here. Now I want to create those horizontal lines. So I'll create another pattern layer by just creating a copy of this one. I'll press Control-Alt-J or Command-Option-J on a Mac in order to jump that layer and name it. H-lines, click OK. And I'm going to get rid of the Gradient Overlay. So just drag it to the trash for this top layer. And then I want you to double-click on the thumbnail for H-lines. I'll bring up the Pattern Fill dialog box and change it to that final pattern, which in my case is H-lines times 13. And then click OK. Now we want to multiply this layer into the background so that we're dropping out the whites. And you do that by clicking on the word Normal in the upper left corner of the Layers panel and changing it to Multiply. And if you're at all familiar with blend modes, this may seem really weird. It's like, what? Why didn't Photoshop just drop out the whites like it's supposed to with Multiply? I'll turn off this H-lines layer and then turn it back on. And somehow even though I've applied multiply to this new pattern layer, the new pattern layer is brightening the thing behind it. That's like impossible in the world of Photoshop. Well, the problem is this color overlay effect. It's gumming up the works. We need it, but we don't need it like this. So double click on an empty portion of this layer to bring up the layer style dialog box. And I'm just going to tell you, all you need to do is turn on this checkbox. Blend interior effects as group, and then the white goes ahead and drops out. Now click OK. And the reason that works is because this time we're applying color overlay before we blend the layer, and that means things end up working out better. All right, I want these lines to be slightly darker, so I'll double click on color overlay to bring up the layer style dialog box. Click on the little green swatch, click in the brightness value right there, the B value, and press shift down arrow a couple of times to take it down to 65%, so we have darker horizontal lines. Click OK again. All right, now I'm going to zoom out by pressing Control-0 or Command-0 on the Mac, and I'll turn back on the scan version of the image, and I'll click on that group in order to select it. And instead of working with the pass-through mode, we're going to change the mode for the entire group to multiply once again so that we burn the line art into the background. Now, we don't want these lines up here at the top. So I'm going to go back up to my options bar and change style from fixed size to normal. And then I'll go ahead and marquee this top region of the image like so. Click on the H-lines layer to make it active and press the Alt key or the Option key on the Mac and click on the Add Layer Mask icon in order to mask that selected region away. If you twirl open the Enhanced Scan group right there and then scroll down to the bottom, you'll see there's a layer called Fills, which are all the white fills inside the various jellos. But if you turn them on, it's not going to make any difference inside the composition, and the reason is because it's part of this group that's set to the multiply blend mode. So we need to get it out of this group, and you do that by dragging fills down ever so slightly, just so it's right there on top of the H-lines pattern layer, and then drop it, and that goes ahead and drops it outside of the group like so. And now I'll twirl that group closed so that I have a little more room to work. And you'll notice, if you have a keen eye, that one of the jellos, the one associated with frame 17 here, is not filled. And the reason is I just wanted to show you how I did these. What you do is you go ahead and click and hold on the gradient tool and select the paint bucket tool from the flyout menu. Then you press the X key to make the foreground color white. And then you go up to the options bar. You can just press the enter key or the return key on the Mac. Then press tab to advance to the tolerance option and change it to 100. And then press the enter key to accept that change. And then finally, you want to turn on the All Layers checkbox. So all three of the checkboxes should be on. Now click inside Jello, and that makes a big mess of everything. We've gone ahead and filled up the entire row with the exception of his teeth here. That's not what I want. So what we've got is basically some breaks in the outline here. So we're going to have to paint those in by pressing Control-Z, Command-Z on the Mac. Then twirl open Enhanced Scan once again. I'm going to click on Redrawn Details, which are those black lines. And now I'll press the B key to switch to my brush tool. I'll press the X key to make the foreground color black. And now, armed with my Wacom tablet, I'll just go ahead and trace around some of the more fragile details here, including this region around the front of Jello's face there. And I'll go ahead and give him kind of a brow as well, as long as I'm here. That's not necessary for filling him, of course, but gives him more of a grimace. And, I'll take a line off of his mouth as well, so that he's looking like he's, really hurting here. I could add some more impact lines, too, if I wanted to. Then I need to fill them. I'll go ahead and switch back to that fills layer down near the bottom of the stack. And I'll switch back to the paint bucket tool as well. And then I'll press the X key to make my foreground color white, and I'll click inside of Jello, and this should work out a lot better. Now notice that I missed this area on the upper side of his eye. Easiest thing to do there is just to press the B key to switch back to the brush tool and paint that region in. Now I'll press Control-0 or Command-0 on the Mac. Just one more thing I want to do here. I'm actually going to zoom in on this version of Jello, the one that we painted in the previous movie. And what I want to do is drop out the whites on the graph lines. And so I'll double click on an empty portion of the fills layer to bring up the layer style dialog box. And I'll go ahead and drag this black slider triangle that's associated with the underlying layer all the way until the graph lines appear. And that happens at somewhere around 210. And we end up getting this effect here. Click OK in order to accept that change. However, if I zoom out by pressing Control-0 or Command-0 on the Mac once again, I lose those lines. What in the world is going on? Well, that's just a screen display issue. If you want to see what things really look like, obviously you can print your image, or click on that Enhanced Scan group in order to make it active, and then press Control-Shift-Alt-E or Command-Shift-Option-E on the Mac in order to create a merge version of all the visible layers. And you can see that goes ahead and brings back those graph lines inside of the white fills inside of the various jellos. And I'll go ahead and rename that layer Merged, and then I'll press Shift-F in order to switch to the full screen mode. And I might as well zoom in a little bit too. You won't be able to see the entire narrative associated with the cartoon, but you can see how great even a fairly rough pencil sketch looks when enhanced like a pro here inside Photoshop. Hey gang, this is Deke McClelland. Welcome to Deke's Techniques. This week, I'm going to show you how to create continuous spirograph patterns, better known as hypotrichoids. Now, in case this sounds familiar, a few weeks back, I also showed you how to create spirograph patterns, but those were not continuous. Those were a series of rotated ellipses, whereas what you're going to see today are two different methods for creating single path spirographs. So the orange spirograph is one path outline and a blue spirograph is another path outline, continuous all the way around. Now you may look at these and think, well, I guess that's an interesting academic exercise, but what it does is it allows us to create extremely complex patterns. For example, you can make lace if you want to, as we'll explore in a future movie. You can create a money emblem like this, as we'll explore in another movie. But first, we have to learn how to make those hypotrichoids. So get out your protractors, and here, let me show you exactly, no protractors, how it works. Here are a couple of continuous hypotrichoids created in different ways. We're going to start off with this document called circles.ai that contains a bunch of different layers of circles. Only one of the layers is turned on, and so as a result, I'm seeing the circle on screen. I'm going to go ahead and click on it to make it active. Notice it has no fill, and it's got a black stroke. First step here for the basic hypotrichoid is to double-click on the Scale tool in order to bring up the Scale dialog box. And you want a non-uniform scale. I'm going to change the horizontal value to 30%, leave vertical set to 100%. If you've got the preview checkbox turned on, you'll see that this gives you an ellipse. Then go ahead and click OK in order to accept that change. Now we come to a little bit of a ponderous part here. We're going to have to rotate this circle using the Rotate tool. We've got to apply a static rotation, and we're going to have to do so 11 times in a row. So go ahead and select the Rotate tool, which you can get by pressing the R key, and then make sure that you have your smart guides turned on. This is very important if you want to get the right results. So just to confirm, go up to the View menu and make sure Smart Guides has a check mark in front of it. If not, go ahead and choose the command. Then position your cursor at the very top of the shape here. You should see the word anchor. It tells you that you've got your cursor over the anchor point. Then Alt-click or Option-click on the Mac in order to bring up the Rotate dialog box. Change the angle value to 30 degrees and click on the Copy button. And now you want to do the same thing for the opposite point. So Alt-click or Option-click on the bottom point in the new path. The angle value should still be 30 degrees. Just go ahead and click on the Copy button. Then Alt-click or Option-click on the opposite point. Click the Copy button. Alt-click or Option-click on the opposite point. Click the Copy button. You just got to do this 11 times. So over and over again. Click Copy, then Alt-click or Option-click on the opposite point. Click Copy, Alt-click or Option-click on that opposite point. Click Copy. I think we're down to just 3 more times here. I hope so. This is quite tedious indeed. And by the way, if we had gone with a tighter rotate value, then we would have to do this even still more times. So the fact that I'm leaving this angle value pretty loose means that we actually make less work for ourselves. I'm going to click Copy in order to create that final ellipse. The result is that we have now a total of 11 ellipses interwoven here. Now let's combine them into a single path outline by switching to the wide arrow tool, which you can get by pressing the A key, and then marquee around the central portion of all of these ellipses like so, and that will select all of their inside points. And then you can press the backspace key or the delete key on the Mac to get rid of them. Now it may appear that we've got some straggler points here. They're actually center points and they're nothing to worry about. So the next step is to fuse all the anchor points together. And you do that by going up to the object menu, choosing path, and then choosing the join command, or you can just press Control J or Command J on the Mac. And you should now end up with one center point, as you see here. Now, if you take a close look, you'll see that we have these little lumps at the top and the bottom of all of our shapes. And that's because the points have been joined into corner points. We need them to be smooth points. And we can convert those points to smooth points using a strange little trick here. The first thing you have to do is press the Shift key. And then go ahead and marquee around this point right there. It's actually a couple of points on top of each other. And that will deselect those 2 points right there. Then you'll see new options up here in the control panel. We've got this second icon in, convert selected anchor points to smooth. Go ahead and click on it, and that should convert all of the selected points, all but these couple of endpoints down here, into smooth points. And now we get these nice smooth arcs. We do have a problem with this point down here. Go ahead and click off the shape to deselect it, and then grab one of the anchor points and move it like so. And you'll notice that we've got a couple of different anchor points. Now, my experience in CS5 is that you'll have a straight segment joining the two. You'll need to get rid of it by marqueing that segment and pressing the backspace or delete key. In CS6, though, we don't get a segment, at least I don't. So I'm going to go ahead and drag this point back so it snaps into place. That way we have two coincident endpoints. And then I'm going to marquee around those 2 points like so. And then what you want to do, whether you're working in CS6 or CS5, is you want to press Control-Shift-Alt-J or Command-Shift-Option-J on the Mac. That forces the display of the old Join dialog box. Next, you want to select the Smooth option and click OK, and that'll go ahead and deliver the final smooth arc. This path outline is no longer centered inside of the artboard, so I'm going to press the V key to switch to the black arrow tool, click anywhere on the path outline to select it. Then you want to go up to the control panel and switch this setting right here from Align to Selection to Align to Artboard, if it's not already selected. And then you want to click on your center options, Horizontal Align Center, and then Vertical Align Center. And that'll go ahead and put that shape in the right place. Now, at this point, you might figure that was about the most tedious technique ever, and it only gets more complicated if you want to add more lumps to the shape. I've got a simpler trick that relies on a dynamic effect, but it's got its own drawbacks as well. So I'm going to turn on the Circle 2 layer, turn off the Circle 1 layer for now. And I'll go ahead and select that new circle by clicking on it with the black arrow tool. Then I'll double click on the Scale tool. And this time around, I'll change the horizontal value to 10%. And I'll leave vertical set to 100%. That way we get a narrower ellipse. And then I'll click OK in order to accept that change. And now what you want to do is you want to switch to the Scissors tool. And you get to the Scissors tool by clicking and holding on the Eraser tool and selecting it, or you can just press the C key. Then you want to click on the bottommost point right there in order to separate it into two endpoints. Press the A key to switch to the wide arrow tool, and go ahead and shift-click on the left-hand anchor point to select it as well. This is assuming that the bottom point is actually the bottom left point as opposed to the bottom right point, which it most likely is. Now what you want to do is switch to your Rotate tool, and then Alt-click or Option-click on the top anchor point. Change the angle value to 5 degrees, and then press the Tab key, make sure the Preview checkbox is on, and you should see this effect right there. Then click OK. Now press the V key to switch back to the black arrow tool, click anywhere on the shape to select the entire thing, and then go up to the Effect menu, choose Distort and Transform, and then choose the Transform command. For this effect, we want an angle value of 10 degrees. Turn on the Preview checkbox so you can see what's going on, and then click inside the Copies value and press the up arrow key until you get 2 complete cycles like so. In the end, you need a total of 35 copies to make this work. Then click OK in order to apply that effect. Now you might figure at this point that was way easier, but all is not as perfect as it looks. If you press Control Spacebar, Command Spacebar on the Mac, and then go ahead and marquee around this point right there, you'll see that we've got a little bit of a problem. Things aren't lining up properly. And here's the easiest way to fix it. It's going to seem like an arduous workaround at first, but it delivers the best results. I'm going to press Control-0 or Command-0 in order to zoom out there. And you want to go up to the Edit menu and choose the Copy command, or press Control-C or Command-C on the Mac. That way, we go ahead and keep this original dynamic effect. Now we want to expand it in the static path outlines, and you do that by going up to the Object menu and choosing the Expand Appearance command. Now that we have access to all of the points throughout this entire effect, Let's change the stroke from black to, let's say, this lightish blue, just so we can see what's going on. Then go up to the Edit menu and bring back the original by choosing the Paste in Front command, or press Control F or Command F on the Mac. Now let's go ahead and zoom in on this point right there again. I'm going to zoom in to 4,800% so that I can really see very closely what I'm doing. Press the A key to switch to the wide arrow tool, and then click off the path outline to deselect it, click on that anchor point to select it, and then drag it down so it snaps into alignment with the blue path that you can't see right now in the background, but you will be able to see the top one as soon as you release. Now we want to make sure that not only the anchor point is in the right place, but the control handle is at the right angle. You want to marquee these 2 points very carefully. Don't marquee this point up here because it'll just get in your face. This top control handle is the one that we want to move, and we want to drag it down so it snaps into alignment with this one. Just start dragging, and then as soon as you see the word handle right there, you're snapped into alignment with it and release. And you can see we've got a very great fusion of these two path outlines here, but we do have a very fine line. And if that worries you, because it could end up being a problem, then press the V key to switch back to the black arrow tool, click on the path outline to select it, go up to the stroke option here in the control panel, and switch the cap to the round cap. Now, because the transform effect now has to take into account this cap, it is going to shove the shapes around just a little bit. So we're going to have to adjust that effect by switching over to the Appearance panel, which you can also get by choosing Appearance from the Window menu, and then click on the word Transform to return to the Transform Effect dialog box. And I just went ahead and tried out a couple of values. I changed both horizontal and vertical to 0.05, and then I turned on the Preview checkbox, and that ended up working out beautifully. So you may have to try a little bit of trial and error. And by the way, you can adjust this value in increments of 0.1 by pressing Control or Command on the Mac along with an arrow key. At least that works in CS6. Anyway, I'm going to change these both to -0.05 and then click OK. All right, now I'm going to press Control-0 or Command-0 on the Mac to zoom out once again. I don't need that blue path outline in the background, so I'll switch back to my Layers panel. I'll twirl open the Circle 2 layer. I'll go ahead and meatball this group right there, the blue group, and I'll press the Backspace key or the Delete key on the Mac in order to get rid of it. Now let's go ahead and mix these guys together. I'll turn on the Circle 1 layer so we can see it. Now the Circle 2 path outline is a little off-kilter. You can't use automatic alignment for this one because of the dynamic effect. So go ahead and turn on the Circle 3 layer just so you can see what you're doing. I'll go ahead and click on the Spirograph, the one we just created, and I'll press Shift left arrow, and then I'll press the left arrow key a couple of more times in order to nudge it over into the proper location. Then I'll turn the Circle 3 layer off. Now, if you want to go ahead and sort of merge these two path outlines together to achieve the kind of effect you'd get with a real Spirograph if you use different inks, then with one of the path outlines selected, go up to the control panel, click on the stroke swatch right there, and change its color, let's say to this medium blue. And then I'll click on this path outline right there to select it. That's our first Spirograph. And then I'll change its color to, let's say, this orange right here. And then I'll select both of the path outlines by marqueeing around them. And I'll bring up my transparency panel. Again, you can get any panel in Illustrator by choosing its name from the Window menu. And then I'll change the blend mode from normal to multiply in order to achieve the final effect. And that way the two inks are mixing together with each other. And that, friends, is how you create continuous single-line Spirograph-like hypotrichoids here inside Illustrator. In this movie, we're going to take those Spirograph patterns that we created in the previous movie, and we're going to add a few more using a special scale tool technique, and we're going to end up achieving this effect here. And then, in the next movie, we'll go ahead and transform these patterns into an actual seal emblem. So let's start where we last left off. I'm going to turn off the Circle 1 and Circle 2 layers for a moment, and then I'm going to turn on the Circle 3 layer, and I'm going to select a path outline in order to make it active. Then I'll go up to the Object menu, choose the Path command, and choose Add Anchor Points. And that's going to double the number of points associated with the circle from 4 to 8. We want twice that many, so I'll go back to the Object menu, choose Path, and then choose Add Anchor Points again. Next, we want to select the segments without selecting the anchor points, and you do that by going up to the Select menu, choosing Object, and choosing Direction Handles. Now, I know at this point I'm just asking you to work through a few steps. It'll all make sense in just a moment. So as soon as you select direction handles, you can see all of the control handles in the path outline without any of the anchor points being selected. Now I want you to go to the scale tool, which you can get by pressing the S key. And you want to start dragging diagonally from the center of the shape. So I'm going to start right about here. And then while pressing the Shift key, go ahead and drag inward like so. Now, if you end up having a problem with the points kind of snapping together, then go ahead and back off a little bit. I'm going to take it down to about 25% as you see here. So my width is 25%, my height is negative 25%. That's very important that one is positive and the other is negative. You're not going to see those numbers in CS5 and earlier, so you're just going to have to wing it. Once you get an effect that looks something like this, then press the V key in order to switch back to the black arrow tool and click on the path outline in order to select the entire thing. And now we need to reduce its size a little bit. So I'm going to turn on the Circle 2 layer. So I have something to measure my new path against. And then I'll double click on the Scale tool in order to bring up the Scale dialog box. And I'll try a uniform value of 30%. That's not big enough, so I'm going to click on the value again and press Shift up arrow. And it looks to me like 62% works out nicely. Then I'll click OK in order to accept that new sort of hypotrichoid. I wouldn't really call it an official hypotrichoid, but it is a continuous path outline that wraps around evenly on itself. Let's try the same thing, except even more so. I'm going to turn off that Circle 3 layer and turn on the Circle 4 layer. I'll press the Control key or the Command key in the Mac and click on it in order to select it. Then I'll go up to the Object menu, choose Path, and choose Add Anchor Points. That doubles the number of anchor points from 4 to 8. Let's go ahead and double them again by choosing Path and Add Anchor Points. And that now takes the number of points up to 16. And then if for a third time I go up to the Object menu, choose Path, and then choose Add Anchor Points, I am left with a total of 32 points. And the idea here is the more anchor points you have, the more segments you have to transform. Then go up to the Select menu, choose Object, and choose Direction Handles to once again select all the curving segments and leave the anchor points deselected so that they don't move. And now, still armed with the Scale tool, I'm going to press the Shift key, and I'm going to drag from below and to the right of that center point, upward and inward like so, until I bring all the segments into alignment with each other there in the center of the shape. Then I'll go ahead and release the mouse button and then release the Shift key. So it's very important that you have the Shift key down. Now we need to scale this path. So press the V key to switch to the black arrow tool. Click on the path outline to make it active. I'm going to turn on that Circle 2 layer again, just so I can see how big this shape should be. You want to double click on the Scale tool, but in all probability, Illustrator is going to get all mad at you and it's going to tell you, oh boy, that big, huge transformation you just applied, I can't replicate it. Just click OK. And it may even complain to you a second time, which is fine. Just click OK a second time. And then change the uniform value to something like, let's say 20%. You want to have the preview checkbox turned on so you can see what you're doing. And then I'll just nudge that value upward to, in my case, 26% turns out to work. Now I'll click OK in order to accept that change. I'll switch back to the black arrow tool, which I can get by pressing the V key. I'll go ahead and turn on the Circle 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 layers so that I can see all of them. I'm going to actually click on the outline of that Circle 5 item right there. It's in the background. If you can't get to it, you can just click in the upper right corner of the Circle 5 layer there in the Layers panel and press Shift X in order to swap the fill and stroke colors. So we now have a black circle with no stroke. And I'm going to resize this circle a little bit by double-clicking on the Scale tool yet again, and I'm going to change the uniform value to 94%. I just know that happens to work out nicely. Then I'll click OK in order to accept that change. Now we want to select everything but this black circle. So go up to the Select menu and choose the Inverse command, which will select all of the other path outlines. That is, the various spirograph patterns that we've created so far. Go up to the Control panel and change that second swatch. Go ahead and click on its down-pointing arrow and change the stroke to white. That's not going to work for all of the strokes because a couple of them are set to the multiply mode. So here in the transparency panel, you want to go ahead and change the blend mode from blank to normal so that you can see all of your strokes. And that's a little bit too much. They're too thick. So I'm going to change the line weight value up here in the control panel to 0.5 points. and then press the Enter key or the Return key on a Mac. And then I'll switch back to my black arrow tool, click off the paths in order to see what I've come up with. That's obviously a stunning effect, but I wanted to take it a little bit farther. So I'm going to click on the top path outline, which is the item on the Circle 1 layer. If you can't get to it, then just go ahead and click in the upper right corner of that Circle 1 layer to select it. And then I'm going to scale it, just like I did the circles, by going up to the Select menu and choosing Object and then choosing Direction Handles. So the segments are selected, but the anchor points are not. And I'll switch to the Scale tool. Once again, I can get that by pressing the S key. And now I'm going to move my cursor just up and to the left of the center of this shape. And I'm going to drag down and to the right while pressing the Shift key. And I'm going to drag beyond the center point, as you see me doing here, until my width and height values are around 35%. And I need one of them to be negative. In my case, it's the width value. So as soon as you get an effect that looks something like this, you want to release the mouse button and then release the Shift key. Then you can press Control-Shift-A or Command-Shift-A on a Mac in order to deselect the artwork. That is the final version of my Byzantine spirograph pattern. In the next movie, I'll show you how to turn this pattern into an official money-like seal. Hey gang, this is Deke McClelland. Welcome to Deke's Techniques. This week, I'll show you how to create a design inside Illustrator that looks like money. Because after all, who doesn't like looking at money? But let me give you a sense of how this works. We're going to take the design from last week, and then we're going to add some scalloped edges around that black circle, as well as adding the number 5, of course. And then we'll create this double wavy line pattern around the circle using dynamic effects. And then finally, we'll go ahead and sculpt the number 5 so it looks like money. Here, let me show you exactly how it works. Here's that money style emblem, so you have a chance to see it on screen. I'm going to switch back to this version of the illustration here. And the first thing we want to do is add some scalloping to the edges of this black circle in the background. So I'm going to scroll down my list here inside the Layers panel and click in the upper right corner of the Circle 5 layer in order to select that shape. Then I'll go up to the Effect menu, choose Distort and Transform, and choose Zigzag, which allows me to create a scalloping pattern. And it really becomes effective once we add the stroke, but we need to approach the fill first. So I'm going to change the size value to 6, and I happen to be working in pixels because this is a web document. And I'm going to take the ridges per segment number up in just a moment after I turn on the preview checkbox so I can see what I'm doing. I don't want to add these corners to my path outline, so I'm going to switch the points to smooth like so. And that gives us this kind of waving edge. And then I'll click inside the ridges per segment value, and I'll press the up arrow key in order to take that value up to 9. Then click OK. Now I want to add some extra ridges that will come in very handy once we add the stroke. So I'll go up to the Effect menu, choose Distort and Transform, and then choose the Transform command. I'll turn on the preview checkbox so I can see what I'm doing. I'm going to take the copies value up to 1, and then I'm going to nudge the angle value up to 9 degrees, which is the point at which we see even scalloping. All right, now go ahead and click OK in order to accept that change. Now I want to apply a stroke, but I want the stroke to appear in front of all the spirograph patterns, so it needs to go to a different layer. So I'll go up to the Edit menu and choose the Copy command, where you can press Control-C or Command-C on the Mac. Then switch all the way up to the number 5 layer, turn it on, and click on that layer to make it active. Now I want you to go to the Layers panel flyout menu and turn off this command right here, Paste Remembers Layers. So it should be off for this next step to work. Then you want to click on the 5 in order to select it, and go up to the Edit menu and choose Paste in Front, or press Control-F or Command-F on the Mac. And you should see that big scallop circle in the foreground. Now we want to get rid of the fill and replace it with the stroke. So switch over to the Appearance panel and grab the fill and drag it to the trash just to get rid of it. Then click on a stroke to make it active. And we want the stroke color to be white. And then I'll take the line weight value up to 4 points. I want to add a black edge around that white stroke. So I'll click on the little page icon at the bottom of the panel in order to duplicate the stroke. Then I'll switch to the rearmost stroke, change its color to black, and then I'll take the stroke weight value up from 4 points to 6 points. And we end up getting this braided effect, as you can see right here. That might be exactly what you're looking for. In my case, it's not. I want to see a continuous white edge that has a black outline behind it. And to achieve that effect, you need to grab the transform effect here inside the appearance panel and drag it above the stroke and fill, directly below zigzag, and you'll end up achieving this effect here. Now, at this point, I decided this white stroke should actually be a kind of pale shade of green, as is the case with American Money. So I went ahead and shift-clicked on the white swatch in order to bring up the RGB values here. And I changed the red value to 230, entered a green value of 235, and then I took the blue value down to 200. Now let's take care of this 5 here. I'll click on it to make it active. Notice that I've gone ahead and converted this character to a path outline so that you're not going to get any kind of font warning. And I'm going to need 2 fills, one for the black shadow and another for the interior of the letter. So I'll go ahead and click on the fill to make it active, and then click on the little page icon at the bottom of the panel in order to duplicate it. And I'll shift-click on that fill swatch for the uppermost fill in order to bring up my RGB values. And I'll dial in those same values as before. That is a red value of 230, a green value of 235, and a blue value of 200. Now I'll click on the black fill in the background there, and I'll go up to the Effect menu, choose Distort and Transform, and choose Transform, because I want to move it down and to the right. So I'm going to increase the horizontal value to 4 pixels, and I'll take the vertical value up to 4 pixels as well. Turn on the Preview checkbox, and you can see that creates a hard edge shadow. Then click OK. Next, I want to expand the shadow a little. So I'll go up to the Effect menu, choose Path, and then choose Offset Path. And I'm going to take that offset value up to 2 pixels, and then I'll turn on the Preview checkbox to see how it looks. That's great. Then I'll click OK. Now I want to add a couple of strokes. The first stroke needs to be behind the green fill. With the black fill selected, I'll drop down to this first icon at the bottom of the panel, Add New Stroke, and click on it. And that should go ahead and add a black stroke by default. And then I went ahead and took the line weight value up to 4 points like so. Finally, what we want to do is add a little bit of tracing on the inside of the letter. I think that's pretty much what sells this effect. So I'm going to click on the fill to make it active, and then I'll add another stroke by clicking on that Add New Stroke icon once again. And this time I want the stroke weight to be 0.5. And I want to move it inward, and you do that by going up to the Effect menu, choosing Path, and choosing Offset Path again. However, this time I'm going to take the offset value down to -3 pixels. Then I'll turn on the Preview checkbox, and you can see that we end up tracing on the inside of the character. Now I'll click OK in order to accept that change. The only thing left is to change the color of the spirograph pattern. So I'm going to click anywhere on any one of these path outlines here to select it. And then I'll go up to the control panel. On the far right side here is this Select Similar Options icon. Go ahead and click on the down pointing arrowhead and confirm that all is selected, in which case you then want to click on the icon itself in order to select all of the paths that match those same attributes. Now go over to the left side of the control panel and shift-click on the stroke swatch right there. And I'm going to dial in those same values again, a red value of 230, a green value of 235, and a blue value of 200. And I'll press Control-H or Command-H on the Mac so I can see what the heck I'm doing. Notice that we can see a little bit of green out beyond the seal now. And we can mitigate that a little by changing the blend mode here in the transparency panel from normal to screen. But it doesn't actually do anything because there's nothing to mix with in the background. We can't just mix with page white. And we'll take care of that in just a moment. But in the meantime, I'm going to take the opacity value down to 75%. Let's give those lines something to mix with so that the screen mode can do its work. I'll switch back to the Layers panel, scroll all the way to the bottom to the Circle 5 layer, and click in its upper right-hand corner like so in order to select that shape. We can't currently see it because I've got my selection edges turned off, so I'll press Control-H or Command-H on the Mac in order to bring them back. And then I'll press Control-C or Command-C on the Mac to copy that path, and I'll press Control-B or Command-B on the Mac in order to paste it in back. I'll switch back over to the Appearance panel, click on the flyout menu icon in the upper right corner, and choose Clear Appearance to get rid of everything that's going on where that path outline is concerned. And then I'll click in the fill swatch right there, and I'll change it to white. Now we need to make the path larger by double-clicking on the Scale tool here inside the toolbox. I came up with a uniform value of 120%. Then I clicked OK, And you can see that now those faint lines completely disappear. Now, if you press Control-Shift-A or Command-Shift-A on a Mac, you'll deselect the artwork. And that's how you turn spirographs into a currency quality emblem here inside Illustrator. Hey gang, this is Deke McClelland. Welcome to Deke's Techniques. This week begins the first of two devoted to my favorite holiday, Halloween. Now, every once in a while we get requests from members of lynda.com, and this time around we got a request to create a technique based on what might be the worst franchise of movies ever made, which is a big claim, I know, Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. Now, if you've never heard of Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, good for you. Way to keep your mind free of dumb junk. But basically, they feature these tomatoes with overwrought faces like this one. I happen to have drawn this face, and I can't show it to you against a tomato because even though Attack of the Killer Tomatoes is just rotten to the core, it is trademarked. So I decided to come up with an alternate technique. We're going to take this just adorable little girl with her beloved pumpkin and turn it into a killer pumpkin that happens to belong to her and protects her in life. Now, you may look at this and say, okay, if you really carved into the surface of a pumpkin, it'd look more like this with this kind of yellowish background. However, I prefer this technique, which is why I'm going to show you exactly how this works. All right, here's the final effect we're going for. And here's where we're going to start. This photograph, by the way, comes to us from the Fotolia image library, about which you can learn more and get special deals at fotolia.com/Deke. First thing you want to do is draw yourself a face, some sort of killer pumpkin face, like this one here. And I painted this image with a Wacom tablet. Otherwise, I just used the brush tool. Although I will tell you something about the brush tool. We'll go ahead and switch to it by pressing the B key, or you can just click on it in the toolbox. And I'll go ahead and bring up the brush panel as well, which you can get to by choosing the brush command from the window menu, or you can press F5. Here's the thing. Unless you want really super lumpy brush strokes, you want to crank the spacing value down. By default, it's at 25%. You really want it at something more like 10%. And that is the default setting for every single brush, 25% that is. So you're going to have to change that setting manually. Anyway, I'll go ahead and hide that panel. Notice also that I've gone ahead and painted the face on an independent layer, so you can see the checkerboard transparency in the background. The only reason it appears to be painted against a white surface is because my background is set to white. Next thing you want to do is make sure that face layer is active, and then using the rectangular marquee tool, so I went ahead and press the M key to switch back to it, right-click inside of the image window and choose the duplicate layer command. And then you want to go ahead and change the document to your photograph, in my case, adorable little girl.jpg, and then click OK in order to copy that layer. If I switch back to that JPEG image, you can see that we've got the face layer inside of it. It's taking up a little bit too much room. It's pretty much unreadable at this point. Make sure that the face layer is active, which it is. Then go up to the Layers panel flyout menu in the upper right corner and choose Convert to Smart Object. And now we have a smart object version of this layer, which means that we can transform and filter it to our heart's content. So the first thing we need to do, obviously, is transform it. I'll go up to the Edit menu and choose the free transform command, or you can press Control-T, Command-T on a Mac. Here's the values I'm looking for. Obviously, you can play around as much as you like, but I ultimately linked both the W and the H values here. So I'm going to perform a proportional transformation. I'll click on a W value to make it active and set it to 34%. And then I'll change the angle value right there to -7. And I'll go ahead and move this guy into the desired position. That turns out to be this. I'm going to enter some coordinates up here for the X and Y values. I set the X value ultimately to 522. And then I set the Y value to 2,225. And those are both pixel measurements, by the way. So if you're working in inches or millimeters or something, you'd have to enter PX. That is to say, if you're working along with me. Now I'll press the Enter key or the Return key on a Mac in order to apply that transformation. It doesn't really make any sense that his face is at this angle when the pumpkin is oriented straight up and down, but he just looks so cute that way. So I'm going to zoom on in to the pumpkin face, and I need to mask him behind the girl's arm. So I'm going to turn the face off for a moment. And then I'll go up to the Select menu and choose the Color Range command. And the reason I turned off the face layer, by the way, was because the color range command is always seeing a view of the composite image. So I needed to get him out of there for a moment. And then I'll click over in this area where I think her arm is, right about there. The fuzziness value is set to 40 as by default. Localized color clusters is turned off. And I'm going to go ahead and shift click in a few locations, maybe shift drag up her hand as well, like so. And then I'll scroll down a little and shift drag inside of her arm right there. And I might go ahead and shift click on that little detail. That worked out nicely. Now you don't want to go too far into the fingers just because you don't have to, and you're going to start selecting regions inside the pumpkin as well. Then go ahead and click OK in order to create that selection. Turn the face layer back on, and then drop down to the Add Layer Mask icon at the bottom of the Layers panel, and press the Alt key or the Option key on the Mac and click on it. And now we'll go ahead and mask that arm away. We need to clean out this mask a little bit, probably not too much, but what I'm going to do is Alt click or Option click on the Layer Mask thumbnail there inside the Layers panel in order to view the mask independently of the image. And using my rectangular marquee tool, I'll select around her face into the top of the image as well. So I'm pressing the Shift key as I drag with the marquee. And then white is my foreground color, so I'll press Alt Backspace or Option Delete on the Mac in order to fill that area with white. Then I'll go ahead and deselect the image. I'm going to switch over to my brush tool here, and I'm going to press the X key. So I'll be painting with black. I'll right-click inside the image window, make sure the hardness is set to 100%, which it is. So I'll go ahead and press the Enter key or the Return key on the Mac to dismiss that panel. And then I'll just go ahead and paint inside of this area like so. Again, we don't need to worry about the fingers. Then just go ahead and click on the thumbnail for the face layer in order to switch back to the composite image. Now, if you zoom in here, you'll notice that the arm mask isn't really cutting into the face properly. So I'm going to unlink the layer mask from its layer by clicking on this little chain icon. And then I'll click on the layer mask to make it active. I'll press the M key to switch back to the rectangular marquee tool, and then I'll press the Control key or the Command key on the Mac and press the right arrow key a couple of times in order to nudge that mask over. Having done that, let's go ahead and make some modifications to this face here. I'm going to go ahead and zoom out a little bit. I'm going to fill the face with a little bit of surface detail from the pumpkin itself, so I'll go ahead and click on the background to make it active. And I'll press Control-Alt-J or Command-Option-J on the Mac in order to jump a copy of this layer. I'll name it Texture, and then I'll click OK, and I'll move that texture layer to the top of the stack. And then I'll clip it inside the face layer by pressing the Alt key or the Option key on the Mac and clicking that horizontal line between those two layers. That's completely covering up everything, so I'll double click on an empty portion of that texture layer in order to bring up the layer style dialog box. And then I'll press the Alt key or the Option key on the Mac and drag the right half of that black slider triangle for the This Layer slider, the top one, all the way up to 160, so that we're allowing some of the blackness from the underlying layer to show through, and then go ahead and click OK in order to apply that modification. Now let's make the face layer appear as if it's cut into the surface of the pumpkin. And I'll do that by selecting the face layer. Then I'm going to double click on its thumbnail in order to open up the Smart Object. Now, if you get this alert message telling you how Smart Objects work, just go ahead and click OK. Now I need to increase the size of this canvas, so I'll go up to the Image menu and choose the Canvas Size command because I need some more room around the face. With the relative checkbox turned on, I'll go ahead and change both the width and height values to 100 pixels. And this will make sense why I'm doing this in just a moment. I'll go ahead and click OK in order to apply that modification. Now I'm going to drop down to the FX icon, click on it, and choose Drop Shadow. From the bottom of the list here in CS6, it's at the top of the list in CS5 and earlier. I'm going to increase the opacity value to 100%. Go ahead and click on the color swatch there and make sure it's black because we do need a black drop shadow here. Click OK. And I'm going to change the blend mode to dissolve. So we get those speckles around the edges, and I'll change the distance value to 0. The spread value should be 0, and the size value should be 20 pixels is what we're looking for. The angle value does not matter because distance is set to 0. So I'll go ahead and click OK to apply that change. And now I'm going to go ahead and close the image window and click the Yes button here on the PC to update that image. That would be the Save button on the Mac. So that gives the face a little bit of added texture you can see right there. But I want to smooth that texture away a little bit. So with the face layer, once again selected, I'll go up to the Filter menu, choose Noise, and then choose Median. I'll go ahead and set the radius to 2 pixels and click OK. And that goes ahead and makes that dissolve look a lot cleaner. Now I'm going to right-click on this filter mask and choose Delete Filter Mask in order to get rid of it, just so that we have a little more room inside the panel. And I'm going to apply 3 different layer effects. So I'll click on the FX icon, and we're going to start things off with Inner Shadow. So I'll go ahead and choose that command. Click on the color swatch to bring up the color picker dialog box, and these are the values we want. 35 for hue, 100% for saturation, and 20% for brightness. So I'll go ahead and click OK. And then I'm going to change the blend mode from multiply to linear burn so that we're really burning in that shadow. And I'll take the opacity value down to 50%. Then all these values need to be adjusted. I'm going to set the angle value to 10 degrees. It doesn't matter if the Use Global Light checkbox is turned on or not, because this is going to be our only directional effect. And I'll take the distance value down to 6. I want 0 for the choke, and I want a size value of 6 as well. So we just have a little bit of shadow, as you can see here. Now I want to color in the interior just a little bit. So I'll click on Color Overlay to make it active. Click on the little color swatch, and this time the values are 40 for hue, 50 for saturation, and then 100% for brightness. I'll click OK, and then I'll change the blend mode from normal to linear burn once again, and I'll leave the opacity value cranked up to 100%. And then finally, I'm going to add an outer glow so that the skin appears to be a little damaged. And so I'll click on the outer glow to select it. I'll click on its color swatch. I want those same exact values, 40, 50, and 100 for HSB. Click OK. And I'll change the blend mode this time to multiply. And I'm going to increase the opacity value to 100%. And I'm looking for a size value of 20 pixels in order to produce the effect you see here. So notice that the flesh is a little bit stained around the edges of the carving. Now click OK in order to apply those effects. Let's go ahead and zoom out a little bit so we can see more of the image at a time. And the last thing I want to do is make his teeth white. Now you might argue that if I'm going to make his teeth white, I should make his eyes white as well, but I played around with both effects and I decided the teeth by themselves looked great. What you want to do is make sure that face layer is active. Right-click inside the image window and choose New Smart Object via Copy in order to create a copy of this layer that is not linked to the same original. Your new layer is going to be below, so go ahead and grab it, and we might as well collapse the layer above it, and then drag that face layer to the top. And we don't want any of the layer effects associated with it. Just grab the word effects and drag it to the trash can at the bottom of the layers panel. We do want that layer mask. We do want that smart filter. We're going to rename this layer teeth because that's what it's going to be. And then I want you to double click on the layer's thumbnail in order to visit the smart object. If you get the alert message, just click OK. For the moment, I'm going to turn off the effects here, and I'm going to create a new layer by pressing Control-Shift-N or Command-Shift-N on the Mac. I'll go ahead and name this new layer Teeth. Now what you want to do is go to your Gradient tool, click and hold on it, and select the Paint Bucket tool from the list. Then you want to set your tolerance value to 100 and make sure all 3 checkboxes are turned on, including all layers. That's very important. Then press the D key and the X key in order to make the foreground color white, and click inside the top teeth and then click inside the bottom teeth in order to fill them in. Now you can turn off that face layer. You can zoom in on your teeth if you want to. You may find that there's a couple of problems here and there. So I'm going to fill in those problems using the brush tool. Go ahead and grab the brush, maybe reduce its size by pressing the left bracket key a couple of times. And there's a little bit of garbage right there that I want to paint out too. That looks pretty good. We need to put the drop shadow back on the teeth, but in white this time. So I'll grab the drop shadow, drag it, and drop it onto the teeth. Double click on the words drop shadow. Click on a little color swatch in order to bring up the color picker. Change the color to white. Click OK. And then click OK again. You can get rid of the face, by the way, if you want to. Just select it and press the backspace key or the delete key on the Mac. And then I'll close this image, click on the yes button here on the PC or the save button on the Mac in order to update that layer inside the image window. We need to mix the teeth with the pumpkin flesh a little bit, and I'm going to do that by double clicking on an empty portion of the teeth layer to bring up the layer style dialog box. And then I'll drag the black triangle associated with underlying layer all the way over to 70 like so, and then I'll press the Alt key or the Option key on the Mac and drag the right half of that triangle all the way up to 210. And now, even though the opacity of this layer is set to 100%, we're getting an interesting mixture of whiteness and pumpkin flesh. Then click OK in order to accept that change. That's it, folks. I'm going to press the F key a couple of times in order to switch to the full screen mode. Maybe zoom out just a little bit here so we can take in this adorable little girl and her killer pumpkin.